Welcome back to the Manage to Win podcast. I'm your host, David Russell. Today's episode is sponsored by Habitly.com. And what about workplace drama? Do you have conflict that happens in your office from time to time or between you and a peer, whatever it might be? Check out Workplace Drama course on Habitly.com, 7 days free if you want to check it out. And it really talks about how to resolve issues and avoid them. And the reason I bring that up is today's episode is with Noah Revoy. He just wrote a book called Become Immune to Manipulation. How do you like that? We're going to talk about manipulation on this podcast. And you may be surprised. It's not just other people that manipulate you, but sometimes we manipulate ourselves. Let's dive in. Noah, welcome to the show. You have a very unique topic for our podcast, so I'm interested to learn more. Please introduce yourself to the audience. Let them know what you're up to.
Thank you, David. My name is Noah Revoy, and I'm a relationship expert. So I help people to have deeper, more meaningful, trust-based relationships in their personal and in their professional lives. And really, when we think about it, everything that we do is in some way a relationship, whether we relate to ourselves, to others, or to the universe. And I wrote a book recently talking about manipulation and how it interferes with those relationships and actually destroys trust and ruins relationships.
So are you finding that there's more manipulation today? Of course, I don't know how you gauge that, but it just seems that whether it's loss of common values here in America, well, actually, I say we do have some, but they're narcissistic. Or the rise of narcissism, the rise of victimhood, whatever you want to call it. It seems like possibly more than ever, people are being manipulated or hijacked without even knowing it.
Yes, I agree with that. We used to have a society where a lot of force was applied through violence. So you were forced to do this or forced to do that. And we've done a great job of suppressing that compared to all across historical norms. We have a less violent society. And what we've done is we've replaced a lot of the physical coercion with emotional, mental, and psychological coercion. And that's really what relationship is. It is, if you think about it as a tool of social warfare versus thinking of it as just something that we do.
Wow, this is going to be great. So, but are you saying all relationships are like social warfare, or have an element of
whenever we use manipulation in relationships, we are turning it from a cooperative endeavor into an adversarial relationship. So we can have cooperative relationships. You and I are working together to inform people about something in a podcast, but then we could have an adversarial relationship where you and I are working at opposite ends. If you're working at opposite ends, you're kind of in conflict with each other, you're adversarial, and people will use manipulation to fight. I still think in most cases it's negative because your goal should be to turn adversarial relationships into cooperative relationships. This way, instead of wasting energy fighting each other, you're somehow cooperating.
Is there a way, I'm not advocating it, but is there a way that manipulation can be a positive? I mean, there is, but there isn't, it seems, because like even if you're at war with another nation or something, or trying to achieve something for the common good, if you're manipulating someone, then I don't know, this really gets into some murky waters.
Yeah, there are some very narrow circumstances in which it's a lifesaver. So there's a book called, I think it's The Gift of Fear. And it talks about how women need to follow their senses of fear and understand when they're in a dangerous situation and take steps to protect themselves. And in the book, it talks about, and I know this because someone was explaining the book recently to me and suggesting that I recommend it to some of my female clients. The woman was kidnapped and she used manipulation to get the kidnapper to let her go without harming her. So she manipulated him. She used shame and guilt and made him feel bad for what he was doing and made him feel like a bad person. And he had, you kidnap someone unless it's a money kidnapping, it's usually because you're going to do something harmful to that person. And so there's a level of aggression and hatred in there. And she was able to turn the hatred that he was having for her back in on himself and escape. So that's an acceptable use of manipulation. Now imagine that same tool, people are using that in their families to get their kids to brush their teeth. It's the wrong tool. We're using it in places it should never be used. We're using it to convince our employees to stay for overtime. We're using it all over the place in politics and in business and in sales. But it destroys relationships, because the long term of use of manipulation is maybe I get what I want, but I ruin trust in that relationship. And the second time I go back, it's not going to work.
So let me pause for a moment. We're not going to stay here long, I'm sure. And your book, does it talk about, if you're in that kidnap situation or in a terrible situation and you need to manipulate someone to get out of it safely, does it explain how to do that, even if it's not saying directly, here's how to manipulate? But
there are some great books on using manipulation as a tool. In fact, every other book on manipulation is how to use it to protect yourself to get what you want. This is a book about how to protect yourself from malicious use of manipulation. And so how to protect yourself, for example, or how to avoid using it in your relationships so that you don't end up becoming the one that is the manipulator. And some examples can be, we talk about what happened in Microsoft with the development of their early cell phones, and how they spent about $2 billion developing a product that every engineer knew wasn't going to sell. But the salesman made sure that they manipulated those engineers into going along with a project, which they would have killed early on if there had been a free flow of information. So it really is an issue of using manipulation in a cooperative environment destroys relationships. Using it in an adversarial environment can save your life. And so there's the time that it's okay to use it and the time that it's dangerous to use it.
But it sounds like it's very rare that you would use it. And it sounds like your book is more about increasing your self-awareness so you can recognize that either, oh, wait a minute, I was manipulating that person, or, oh, wait a minute, this person I trusted is a narcissist or has some other issue, and they are trying to manipulate me.
Yes. And most manipulation that we encounter comes from well-meaning people. It's not malicious. It comes from people that have these needs that they need to get met. They don't have any other tools. They're not very good at persuasion. They may not be good at communication, but they know how to manipulate. And they know that in the past, people have got what they wanted out of them through manipulation, and that they've gotten what they wanted out of manipulation. And so they employ it. And this happened to me a few years back. I was working as a consultant for a small software development house. And we were working on software developments for modernizing African universities. And we had three entities. We had the entity that was in charge of the entire project. We had the university, and then there was the company I worked with. And we made a proposal of what we thought would be a great solution for the university. And even though we had spent a month talking about this and getting agreement on every step of the way, we realized that the modernizing company, the one that the university had hired, started making all these unnecessary changes, flip-flopping back and forth. And what I did is I thought, what is it that they need? Why are they doing this? Because they're not going to be the end user. And what I realized after asking them and getting into them about how they felt about things and their needs, and the deeper thing is that they needed to put their fingerprint on the project so that they could point back to the university and say, well, that feature is the one that we decided to put in, or that feature. And so they needed to feel like they had negotiated a great deal for their client, even though probably we ended up with a deal in the end where there was less work done for more money. And that's what they decided they wanted. But it gave them that opportunity to look like the hero to their client. And so by questioning people about what it is that they really need, what is it that you really want? And it's not always obvious. And it's not always a rational business win. Sometimes they need to save face. Sometimes they need to look good. And letting them do that is very important.
So what are some of the key habits to develop to recognize manipulation either in yourself or another person?
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned in yourself, all manipulation starts internally. So we can't be manipulated unless we start first to manipulate ourselves. And so we will, well, I'll just go along with this. I'll just go along with it because, this person's an authority figure, and I am a person that just listens to authority figures, and we'll manipulate ourselves into this position. And what you have to do is you have to start having empathy. First, you have empathy for yourself. And you start to say, no, my needs are important too. I need to make sure that any deal that I get involved in satisfies my needs as well. I have to make sure that this is a win-win situation. And then we need to have empathy for the other party. We need to genuinely care about helping the people we do business with or that work for us or that we work for to accomplish their goals. Because if we create a situation where we win and they don't, it's going to be a very short relationship. And we'll end up developing a reputation as someone that no one wants to work with, because if you do, you lose. And it comes down to that empathy, because it's not always a business win. There has to be business wins, but it's very often comes down to some element of emotional satisfaction that people get out of doing business with us.
But let's stay with the self situation for a moment. So let's say I have a business decision. Let's say there's a partnership, and I feel that if I do this partnership, then I'm going to be able to move from point A to point B. However, there's some details about the potential partner, or after I get into the partnership, that are concerning. And then I manipulate myself, say, well, I don't have to think about that because I really want to go from point A to point B.
Yes.
And, I'm being very nondescript, but I've been foolish enough to be in this situation too many times in my career. So I'm curious how your approach helps me catch that and possibly choose my character, which I want to retain, my integrity, whatever word you want to use, more than wanting to go from point A to point B, which I've got my negativity committee or whatever's going on in my brain trying to motivate me to violate my values, not demonstrate good character, whatever, or just make a bad decision. To get, I really want to get to B.
Yeah, I've seen so often that we tend to do due diligence for clients better than we do it for ourselves. So what I tell people, even in private coaching, is if you were your own mother or own father, what advice would you give about this relationship issue? And I say that to people. If you were a consultant giving your client advice on this situation, what advice would you give? Because by stepping outside yourself, you remove the emotional element. And that allows you to look at it rationally. Now, you have to have empathy with yourself to understand this person, this potential business partner. I like this guy. He's charming. He's cool. I want to be cool too. I want to sit at the cool people's table, and this guy's cool. And that can be great. That can make it more fun to work with someone. But is that causing me to ignore things that I should pay attention to? And now, if you're a consultant, you're like a shark. You're protecting your client. That's your job. You take care of your client. You take care of your people. And we sometimes don't do that with ourselves because we've manipulated ourselves into believing that either a fake need, such as the need to be on the cool table, or our needs aren't important.
Or need to get that contract or whatever. And I do like the way you're saying, if you develop a habit of stepping outside yourself, and you mentioned something alluding to spiritual stuff. I mean, whether it's the WWJD, what would Jesus do, or whether it's a different faith, or whether it's simply, you're not really into spiritual stuff, but you have a particular standard for your behavior that you have, that internally, you're compromising.
Yes.
But you really want to get to point B. And so if I step outside, do you find that sometimes you need to have another person or two or three people So you have kind of a sounding board when the alarm goes off and it's like, I might be going in the wrong direction here. Does that help you?
Yeah, the more successful you are, and especially if you're a dominant type personality, you need to find someone that will tell you no. You need to find someone that will look for the holes in your plan and tell you no. My wife is great for that. I'll tell my wife what the plan is, and she will figure out every way it could go wrong, and she will get suspicious of anyone that I'm going to do business with long before I recognize that there's something wrong with them, and she'll pick it up real quick. Women's intuition is fantastic, and she'll let me know, and she does it in a non-negative, it's not a designed to tear down my enthusiasm for the project, but she will recognize the risks, and she'll say, have you thought about this? And have you thought about that? Because I am an excessive optimist. And so I tend to say, I have a huge trust in my own capacity to deal with problems as they come along. And so I'll just jump in. And that works until it doesn't. And when it doesn't, it's a big problem.
So what do we do about this manipulation, Noah? Either recognizing it in ourselves or recognizing it in somebody else, just so we get better at understanding when someone is doing that. Because ideally, and I don't think everybody on the podcast would agree with this, although I think the majority of the audience does because we have great people. But a lot of people don't realize that, and it took me many years to realize it, we really want to choose the relationship first, not winning, not getting from point A to point B. And I think that's what you've been saying. So how do we learn this emergency warning system? Woo, woo, woo. There's a manipulation going on.
So how do we learn that? There's a set of characteristics that are used by manipulators, or techniques that are used by manipulators, and we call it GSRRM. It's not a good acronym because it doesn't exactly match the things inside, but they use things like shaming. So they will shame us. What are you? Come on, you're going to make this investment. You said you were going to do it. Are you a coward now? You're giving up. That's an example of shaming. Or you promised when we really hadn't promised. We had suggested that maybe we should look into it. There's other ones like undermining, where someone will subtly undermine our own self-confidence so that we will give over decision-making power to them, assuming that they're going to now make a better decision. And there's several of them. I think it's about 12 of them. And what we want to do is say, do I feel like I'm being manipulated in this case? And then we go to the book and we have a look at the list and we say, am I being shamed? Am I being gossiped about? Am I being undermined? Am I being psychologized? If you don't agree with this, you're crazy, and we go through that list. And if you go through the list, it sounds really, really harsh. And you think nobody's going to do that to me in real life. But, good manipulators are pretty subtle about it. They'll shame you in very subtle ways with questions instead of direct accusations. They'll undermine you with little things, saying, oh, really? You sure you can handle that? That kind of stuff. And the difference between it being manipulation and genuine concern becomes evident when we see the pattern. And we'll normally get some sort of a warning sign. My son said this the other day. He was watching something on the news, and it was something the school asked him. His school asked him, watch this one piece of news and tell us what you think. And he watches a bit of it and he says, that's propaganda. He says, the first half of the news article the news story doesn't match the second half. There's an inconsistency. And I recognize that inconsistency is somewhere there's a lie in there. And he recognized this on his own. And I was surprised because I figured at the end, I'm going to have to explain to him how to pick this out. But most children are very well tuned to what is true and not true, and what is a lie or what is fair and not fair. And then over time, we get manipulated into being willing to accept lies because it's socially inconvenient to tell the truth. We don't want to end up like Socrates, we don't want to end up. Socrates was killed because he told the truth.
Not a good thing. So
forced to drink hemlock.
Yeah. So it's very interesting what you say, because one of the things that strikes me with society today, and particularly the media, is there's a lot of partial truths. And so things come up that are not totally true. So, and I hesitate to bring this up because it's controversial, but it is a very good example. So I was looking up something actually yesterday where there was a post. Actually, there's been major people, including like a U.S. senator, who have made the claim that because I was looking at the defund the police movement that came up in 2020 and has since faded mostly, but there were certain people that were claiming that the police came out of the slave trade that was going on in the U.S. And it was, police was, they were trying to round up slaves, and otherwise we never had police in the U.S. It all started with the slave thing. And so I thought, wow, that doesn't seem to make sense. If I look at history, there were police in Rome, there were police, in England, in Great Britain, blah, blah, blah. And what I found was it was a partial truth that, we had police in Boston, I think was the first police that were established, and then Philadelphia and New York and some other ones. But when the southern states implemented it, either the primary purpose or one of the purposes was this, rounding up slaves. So it was partially true, but some people either knowingly or unknowingly were, the knowingly ones would be manipulating to make some point, but it's based on a partial truth. So I think it's really fascinating that your son recognized, wait a minute, the first part doesn't match up with the second part. There's like a partial truth there, and somebody's trying to manipulate me, or they're just mixed up. How do you kind of discern that?
Well, for me, I'm not too concerned if they're trying to manipulate me or if they're just wrong about something. They're confused, because the end result is that I have to make a decision for myself, and I can't read their intent.
Yeah,
I'm not too worried about malicious intent. Now, of course, if you see someone has malicious intent, you'll be at a higher level of threat awareness. You're going to start to go, maybe everything they tell me. I mean, this happens in the news at this point. Almost everything we hear, most people will listen to the news with this very skeptical ear now, which I think is useful, not to believe everything we hear. But we have to not worry too much about what the other person intends out of it, and start worrying about what decision we have to make, which means digging down to see what it is they really want. And that works in a lot of these cases. There is, for example, in the US, there are actually two different types of policing. And one is the sheriff policing, which comes from the UK historically. And those police answer to the public directly because they're elected.
Yeah.
And then there is the municipal style of policing, which answers to the politicians. And that's who their boss is. They're there to support the people in power, whereas the sheriff is there to support, and the sheriffs are peacekeepers. They're not law enforcers. So they only keep the peace. They don't enforce every law. Now, sometimes that gets mixed up a bit, but generally the police are there to enforce laws, whereas the sheriff is just there to keep the peace. And that really comes from two very different traditions and beliefs about law. And we often have this today. We'll see because we don't live in this unicultural, unipolar world where the only people that have an effect on my life are people that I know. And that's what we used to live in years ago.
Yeah.
And so we're confusing the stories that are much more complex than we could think about. But in the end, we have to make a decision. What am I going to do? And we have to make a decision that's a win for us while still trying to maintain a win for the people that we are dealing with.
And I really like your approach too, particularly on the controversial subject I brought up, because what I came away with, I was just like, I don't agree with this particular argument, but we're all agreeing on one thing, and that is that law enforcement today needs to change.
Yes.
Because it's not working well, and sometimes it gets really out of whack. And my focus is, where can I find areas to agree with these people? And I love the way you're coming back and you're saying that, we don't start in a place of fear of everybody's trying to manipulate me. We start in a place of trying to discern, the information and what I want to choose to believe, and then what decision am I going to make that's not being manipulated by someone else. I think that sounds very positive.
But we have to do something that's very difficult for most people. We have to both have empathy and we have to have a system for measuring manipulation and dealing with it. And generally, people are empathizers or systematizers. They're not usually able to do both things. And so what I have in the book is here, I talk about empathizing with people so that we can find out what it is they really need or really are seeking in order to create a win-win situation with them. But I also talk about a system that we can use in order to identify in a practically scientific way what's happening with the manipulation. And the reason that we do this is because if you're a systematizer, you need to add some empathy there in order to defend yourself against manipulation. And if you're an empathizer, you need to add some systematizing in order to prevent your empathy from getting hijacked and used against you. A good manipulator will look at the person and say, this person's a systematizer. I'm going to use the system against them. This person's an empathizer. I'm going to use the empathy against them. Their empathy. And they know where our weak spots are. And they'll use that against us.
So if I'm understanding correctly, the empathy piece, so in that person, they're going to make, well, I guess in both the empathy and the systematizer, they're going to make emotional decisions to a certain extent. But the systematizer, are they going to use more data? Is that going to be more data driven?
Yeah, the systematizer will believe. I mean, the reality is we're very emotional creatures. And what we often think we're thinking, we're really just emoting. And it's just the way it is. Yeah, humans are mostly emotional. The systematizer will say, these are the rules of engagement. These are the rules of right and wrong. These are the social rules I have to follow. And the manipulator will say, how do I bend these rules to get what I want out of this person? Okay, so they're gonna use those rules against them. And the empathizer says, yeah, rules are okay, but special cases, and I want to help people, and I care about people, and that's a great thing. It can be hijacked by narcissists and by psychopathic people, and many people when they get scared, when they're afraid that their needs aren't going to be met, they go from being genuinely pretty good people to being dangerous. They will say and do anything to get their needs met. And you can see this. The classic example is the drug addict, that he was such a great guy and then he got on drugs and now he'll do anything to get more drugs, including hurting people he loves. And it's because he's got this new need that he can't satisfy any other way. And it's consuming him. But people are like that when they're desperate for approval, desperate for attention, desperate for security. They will become quite dangerous. And we can still, if we can help them know that they're going to have their needs met, reassure them that their needs are going to be met. Look, changes are coming in the company. You're going to be okay. We're going to find a place for you. Or even if we have to lay some people off, we're going to help you have a soft landing. Look, I got contacts. I know other people. I'll help you find your job, whatever it happens to be. Now we reduce friction with the people that we're doing business with, that we live with our family. If you want to say to your wife about something that you're concerned about, you don't start off with the problem. Most men want to start off with the problem. No, you start off with reassuring her that you love her and that the whole reason you're coming to talk to her is because you want the relationship to be better and stronger and last longer.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it looks like an attack. Whereas maybe, if you and I had a problem, you just come to me and tell me exactly what it was, because we might think differently.
Yeah. So there is a part of it is we have to approach different people differently, if I'm understanding you correctly. Yeah.
Yes. And then, so if we see them, we see what we perceive to be manipulation, we want to go and have a chat with them. And the chat we ask is not, you've been attacking me. I feel manipulated. Let's have a confrontation, because then now you've put yourself into an antagonistic position with someone you hopefully can cooperate with. What you do instead is you say, I see that there's something bothering you. And I see you're trying to get a need met, but for some reason, I'm not able to perceive what that is. Let's talk about what your need is and what you want to get resolved. I've worked with companies that have lost massive business deals because the new proposal for how we were going to help them meant that 2 or 3 people on the decision-making team would become obsolete. And those 2 or 3 people decided that, no, I'm going to sabotage this because I want to keep my job. And if we had been more perceptive and we had noticed that they feel insecure because what we're proposing will make them obsolete, we need to find a place for them in the project. We need to make sure that they feel they're essential to the project. So this is the whole key of it is that we're managing relationships with people and we're managing them over the long term. So I can get what I want from someone with manipulation on the first meeting. On the second meeting, it becomes hard because now they don't trust me. On the third meeting, we're going to war now. This isn't a friendly discussion anymore. Now it's me versus them, a winner and a loser. And if you're doing win-lose business, there are people that have made a lot of money doing win-lose business. But for most people, especially smaller businesses, that is how you get crushed. You make enemies, and then eventually those enemies don't want to do business with you, and you end up exiled from the business community. It happens to people.
Yeah. And so let's say somebody manipulates you, whether it's they feel they have a sincere reason or for personal gain, whatever. Are you recommending that you have a conversation one-on-one to say,
Yes.
I don't understand what happened, or what would be the process there?
Yeah, I'd go to them and I'd say to them, and I would open with empathy because I'm a systematizer by nature. So I would open with some empathy and I'd say, I see that you're unhappy with how things have been going, or that you want more, or that you're concerned about this thing, whatever the thing is they're trying to manipulate me on. And then I will get them to express their needs and concerns, and I will listen to them. So now I have established that we're on the same team. We're on the same side. We're trying to work together. And then I will say, the way that you were trying to express that before didn't work because you were shaming me, and shame doesn't work on me because I have nothing to be ashamed of. And so it's just, I'm immune to it. In fact, it kind of irritates me a little bit because I don't like to be approached that way. Here's how you can get what you want out of me. You need to come to me and propose a win-win solution. Let's work on that win-win solution. Let's figure out how we can both walk away from this happy. Whenever I fired someone, unless I fired them for such gross incompetence that I don't even want them working for my competitors, I help them find a job. I fire somebody, I help them find a new job. Yeah. Because I've had so many times I do that, they go off somewhere else and they bring me business back to my company.
Yeah.
Because if you help people, if you're genuinely sending out good energy out into the world, and that sounds very woo, but it really works. If you're cultivating this good relationship, everyone says, if I work with David, I make money. I want to work with David. I don't care how. Let me find a way. Let me find a way to work with David. I'm going to offer him something so that he'll work with me. If you're in that position, or your company is in that position, you don't have to look for clients. Clients find you. They want to work with you. And it's a whole lot easier because, as I mentioned before, we are mostly emotional creatures. Most decisions are made emotionally and then backed up with some business logic. So we make the decision to work with someone. We make the decision to be a partner with someone. And then we make sure by doing due diligence that it makes business sense. But if we sorry, go ahead. No,
I totally agree with you. And going back to your book and this unique thing that you've got going on, it's important as a soft skill to learn how to identify manipulation in ourselves or in others. So I've never done this before, but would you talk about the book for just a moment and what you've got in there and what people are going to gain? I think it's just something that people need to consider. Don't go on for 20 minutes, but give us some insights here.
So here's the book. You can get it on Amazon worldwide. And the objective of the book is to help you to develop an immunity to manipulation. So immunity doesn't mean that you'll never be affected by something, but it means that you can protect yourself from it. And so we go through the signs of how to know you're being manipulated. We teach you how to prepare ahead of time before you're ever manipulated, so that if you are the victim of malicious manipulation, you have a structure in place in order to protect yourself. You have people around you who will help you, so that if you're accused of something manipulative or whatever, you can protect yourself. But we also teach you what to do instead of manipulation. So instead of manipulation, we teach persuasion. And persuasion is creating that win-win situation. And we teach you how to do that in a way, even when you're dealing with someone manipulative. So of course, if you have two people, dealing honestly with each other, that's easy. But what happens when you're dealing with someone that doesn't know any other way? That's all they've ever known is manipulation. They grew up on it, so to speak.
Yeah.
You need to know how to deal with that, because if you decide I'm not going to do business with anyone that manipulates me, you will never do business again. I'm not going to have anybody in my life that manipulates me. You'll be all alone living in a cabin in the woods. Because as even myself, as much as I am against manipulation, as much as I hate it, because all of us grew up on it, I will occasionally see myself just start to do that with my children or my wife or people I do business with. And I catch myself and I say, no, I got to fix that. But when you understand how to go through that process of cleaning that manipulation out of you, your relationships become higher trust. So we can do business. We trust. If I say something, you can know this is not a manipulation. I'm telling you the truth. And what that allows us to do is transmit information much quicker, which means that it's much faster to do business, which means we can beat all the slow people that are manipulating.
Well, I love the title of the book, Become Immune to Manipulation. It's great. Encourage people to check it out. I thank you, Noah, for being on the show. This has been really interesting. And I love where you're going. Where do we get so we're on the same page with people? Where do we get win-wins? And it is a negative to be aware of manipulation, but it's better to be aware of it, be able to respond to it. As you just said, prepare for it. So thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, David, for having me on.
Thanks for tuning in today. If you liked the episode with Noah, please subscribe, leave us a comment or a rating. We'd love to hear from you, and stay tuned. More good guests coming on. Thanks. Bye for now.